Let's talk about geometry. Chances are somewhere in your educational experience, you took a math course called geometry. And that's where you talked about lines and parallel and planes and points. Well, those things are important when you're talking about building a cigar box guitar. As I've been building them over the years, I've learned a lot of lessons about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense when I have a problem, what caused it. And a lot of times it always gets back to the geometry. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time and share with you some of the things I've learned about the geometry of building a cigar box guitar. The way I look at it and where I get started is we all know what a straight line is. I kind of know that the one straight line, the one thing we do know for sure is that if you tighten up a string between point A and point B, you're going to have a straight line. Everything else kind of builds off of that line. One of the things I've talked about, and again, it gets back to my first guitar and gets back to all the guitars that I've looked at and had time to visit with the new builders. The one thing I've noticed more often than not is that the action or the distance between the string and the fret is always too high. On my first one, I could almost crawl under it. It was so high, but I've seen that a lot. So I typically tell people that's what you need to focus on. We need to get this relatively close. Now, there are people who play a slide that say they want one higher, but generally speaking, when I've talked to musicians and I've talked about action height, they always say they like a close action height or a lower action height. Because a little bit of the problem, if you know, again, trigonometry, you know about triangles, one of the problems we got, if the string is too high and you bend the string down to the fret, you're changing, again, the geometry, and the string or the note will actually go sharp. So it's really nice to have it very, very close. One of the things I tend to do is I tend to put, when I'm getting ready and I'm doing setup, is I take a look at it and see the distance when I put my finger on the third fret and I look underneath the first fret. I make sure that there's just a very little bit of daylight. And then as I work my way down, I also can see a little bit more down here. So the idea, again, with geometry, when you talk about parallel, what we have is the string and we have the tops of the fret, and they're not perfectly parallel, but they're opened up just a little bit. And when you get into building these things, what you're going to find is those are all things that are adjustable. The height of the string up here is based upon the nut and how deep the slots are. It's also based down here on the bridge and how you adjust the bridge and where you take the back end. And then in between there's some interesting thing, like there's a pickup that you've got to get over the top of it. So these are the things we're concerned about, making sure that the geometry is right. One of the things we have to be concerned about is the neck and how it's lined up with the top of the box. Sometimes it's parallel. Sometimes it has what's called a back angle, that it's leaning back a little bit. One of the things I talk about in an upcoming video, you'll see another video where I talk about how to install a neck through box. And I actually give you the dimensions and tell you how to determine what's a good back angle. On a neck through design, what we're able to do on a neck through design is we can adjust it by putting a shim. I have a lot of thin shim that I use around here. This happens to be a little piece of cherry. And what I can do is I can slide that under the top here and get just an ever so slight back angle. And that seems to help out a lot. One of the things that's also really, really helpful is to have a nice straight edge, because then you can kind of see how things are working, see how it's lining up. You can go from, this one's not, it's just about long enough that I can actually go from the top of the nut and I can run it down to the top of the saddle, so I can actually see the geometry and see how it's going to work out. Because on this one, we again had the pickup. So as you're looking at building them, this is kind of a box that we'll kind of talk about the issues. Again, I have a box here. This is one of my easy boxes. I have an easy neck, one of my favorite ones. What you can see is we sell with all of the easy necks, we sell a neck shim. This neck shim actually is installed in there because it's a little bit taller. Because on this build, I know that I'm going to have a pickup. I have one of my micro pups, and here's the cover. And so what I have to do is I have to mount it to where when I get that neck on there and I get the strings out, they'll go over the top of that pickup and they'll clear that pickup. So we need to raise this up a little bit. If we didn't have that shim in there, the strings would hit on top of the pickup cover and wouldn't work out well. So that's one thing we can do. We can adjust the neck. We can go up or down, tilt it a little bit, or go up or down. So that matches up nicely with a bridge on this end. And this is a bridge, very typical hardtail bridge. Use these a lot on a lot of my builds. We also sell a shim, and that shim is a piece of wood that's laser cut to the right size, and it works out well underneath the bridge. And so what we can do is we can put this all together. We have all these building blocks, all these parts that go together, and we can actually sit down and we can look at it and make our adjustments. And then as we get closer to the finish, we even do a finer adjustments because, again, as you know, on these bridges, they have up and down adjustments. So you can go up and you can go down. Because on the bone, we can actually take our files and we can file that down and get it lower so the string set lower. So it's a matter of getting the geometry all right, but anticipating ahead of time what the issues. You need to get over the pickup. You need to have a little taller bridge. Just all those things have to take into consideration. So it's all about getting the geometry right to make sure that it works out well. See you in the next video.